This time it's 5 more motorcycling disasters. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. How can one define a motorcycling disaster? Sometimes it's a machine that's obviously so unreliable from the beginning that it won't sell. Sometimes it's just that the concept's wrong. Sometimes a bike sells pretty well initially, but then the problems start to pile up and it turns into a financial disaster for the company. Here's 5 really good examples that show even the best companies can get it horribly wrong sometimes. Produced in 1982 and 1983, Yamaha's XZ550 had the makings of a surefire sales success, but it wasn't. And it wasn't for a number of reasons. There were, of course, a few teething problems and a few minor niggles, some of which dogged the machine throughout its production life. Carburation issues, particularly in the first year, didn't do a great deal to warm the general public to the design. But it was very futuristic. The water-cooled V-twin, which had a great range of power, pulling from very low and revving out at a very high RPM, as well as shaft drive, the machine was seen as a sort of alternative to BMW's twins. And there lay the problem. The machine looks vaguely sporty with all those trendy angled lines. But the problem was the suspension was soft and squishy, and the brakes weren't particularly good either. So what you got was an engine which was capable of being rather sporty and a slightly stodgy frame, or at least stodgy running gear. It's almost like Yamaha couldn't quite decide what bike they were actually making. And in the end, what Yamaha got wrong about this bike is probably as simple as the concept. In essence, the concept was wrong and the bike didn't sell. As a result, after 2 years of very poor sales of what was a rather pricey machine, Yamaha pulled the machine from the European market. A later 400cc version would go on to around 1987, but the machine never did reach its early potential, and these days it's often seen as a what might have been machine for Yamaha. The Norton Commando. For a number of years running in the late 60s, it was voted MCM Machine of the Year, and with the isoelastic frame, it made a great touring bike. It was light and sporty and accelerated like nothing else on the road at the time. It was a firm favourite with a sporty rider. So what did Norton do next? Well, they decided to produce an even sportier version in what is these days often called the combat engine. The combat engine used high compression pistons and wild camshafts to kick the horsepower up a notch. This was a blisteringly quick machine by the standards of the day, but there was just a couple of problems. The 4-speed gearbox really was beginning to struggle by the time we got to these higher power outputs. But an even bigger problem, and one which would seriously damage Norton's reputation, was the camshafts. All supply to the camshafts was insufficient given the high RPMs and high power productions that the combat engine was kicking out. As a result, premature camshaft failure was inevitable. It seems that Norton may well have been aware of this, because they advised people to run the bike at reduced RPMs during the running-in period, the running-in period being just long enough to take the bike past warranty. With the warranty period expired, the riders started to open the machines up. Surprise, surprise, the camshafts fell apart. Another area of problems for these machines, not surprisingly, was the crankshaft bearings. Again, these were placed under heavy load by the higher compressions. A lot of engineering firms in Britain would make a fair amount of cash selling improved bearings, often called super blend, to Norton buyers. It's a shame in many ways that the Combat gave so many problems, because the Commando had been until that point a great sales success. In the end, Norton stuttered on into the mid-70s. By that time, the engine had grown out to 850 cc's, well, just under in point of fact, and the machine had become increasingly heavy and less sporty. But in the end, it was its old-fashioned design which would put pay to the Commando's ongoing success. Bimotor V-Do. This is a great demonstration of how a successful company can put itself out of business. Bimotor had got a great reputation throughout the 70s and 80s as the builders of some of the finest chassis in the world. During this period they'd used Japanese or Italian engines, all with great effectiveness. But Bimotor decided they wanted to give the owner a truly Grand Prix-like experience, so they developed a V-twin two-stroke. Just in the era when two-strokes were being killed off by fuel emission regulations. To offset the emission problems, Bimotor decided to fuel inject the engine. Unfortunately, they didn't really have the cash to really perfect the fuel injection system, and when the bike hit the road, after considerable delay, the fuel injection system simply wasn't worked out. As a result, the fueling was said to be truly terrible. Bimotor recalled all the bikes and tried to fix it. The problem was, by the time the problems had largely been ironed out, the damage to the reputation had been done. Bimotor was massively out of pocket, and the company simply could not survive the financial hit. In the end, this was the machine that really did drive them out of business. Suzuki's TL1000 has a fearsome reputation. And whether that fearsome reputation is deserved is a matter of some conjecture. But the problems originate around its rotary damper system that they used on the rear suspension. This was said to be somewhat ineffective and at times downright dangerous. Many people claim that it resulted in a number of accidents and deaths. Quite how bad the problem was is difficult to say, and it's a great pity because the general concept of the bike was excellent. In essence, it was an SV650 blown out to 1000 cc's. The styling was somewhat individual, as you would expect from Suzuki, but what you were really getting was a very cheap Ducati. The machine was thunderously quick, great fun to ride, and should have been a massive sales success. Unfortunately, rotary damper issues would wreck the bike's reputation. There are those that would buy it simply because it had a dangerous reputation. Suzuki produced a number of fixes to sort the problem out, but by then it was all too late and the damage was done. Harley-Davidson's Excelsior. It surprises many people to learn that back in the 1970s, Harley-Davidson had a go at the calf racer market, but have a go they did. The machine, for me, has great styling. It really does look wonderful. It's so unusual with that big Harley motor and with that all blacked out look. It's a really beautiful bike, I feel. The problem was it was also a rather undeveloped bike. The chassis wasn't really up to the job of being a calf racer, nor was the gearbox, and particularly the engine also. At high speed it was said that the engine vibrated more than any mortal could bear. Also the disc brakes simply weren't up to the job of stopping a machine from high speeds. This was a machine let down by its relative crudeness. For Harley-Davidson Cruiser, that crudeness can be seen as character, but for a machine that was destined to be some sort of sportier bike, then the issues became all the more amplified. Today the machine is a real collectible classic, as it should be because it is, I think, in many ways an American work of art, and perhaps one of the most beautiful Harley-Davidsons ever made. It just may not be one of their best. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, thank you very much for watching.